Today we're going to talk about carbohydrates and how important carbohydrates can affect our bodies and how we need to use carbohydrates to help us get the results that we want to do. There's a lot of confusion out there about carbohydrates, so I'm going to really be going through a lot of good information on how much carbs you should eat in a day or how often we should eat carbohydrates. And you're going to hear me, I'll call carbohydrates carbs a lot to help kind of keep it simple. So what is a carbohydrate? Well, like protein, it's a macronutrient that we use in our body. Think about this. Sugar, every time we have sugar, any kind of a sugar item that we eat, which is most carbohydrates, converts into glucose in our body. That's how our body uses sugar and uses carbohydrates as glucose. This is what gives us energy. Carbohydrates are just good natural energy. Remember, protein was the building blocks that builds our bodies. Carbohydrates is what gives us the energy that we need. Now, 1 gram of carbohydrate is equivalent to 4 calories. So this is great because you can think about it. So for every gram you eat, you're getting 4 calories of energy. On the other side, it takes 4 calories of energy to burn off 1 gram of carbohydrate. Carbohydrates, unfortunately, can convert to fat easily. Protein doesn't like to convert to fat very easily. It's a long process, and our body just doesn't like to do it. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, tend to be able, the way the molecules are, it can be converted to fat much more easily. And that's why if we consume more carbohydrates and more sugar than our body needs as energy, our body's going to tend to want to just store that as fat, especially later in the day. Remember we talked about that a couple sessions ago about how important it is to eat less carbs and less sugar at nighttime, eat more of it in the beginning of the day. That way at nighttime you're eating less. So a lot of people always ask, well, why is it that carbohydrates convert to fat so easily? Well, let's just look at this as a quick little process. Remember, you eat carbohydrates, which turns into sugar, basic sugars, and that turns into glucose in our body, and that's how our body uses energy, is as glucose. Well, when you do this, and if you eat a lot of carbohydrates or a lot of sugars at once, especially without eating protein at the same time, that causes a spike in our insulin, which then causes that glucose to go rushing around our body, goes all throughout our bloodstream, looking to be used as energy. So you kind of think about it like that glucose keeps going to all your muscle cells and asking, do you need me? Do you need energy? And those muscle cells are either going to accept it and use that energy, or they're going to reject it and say, hey, we don't need any more energy here. If it gets rejected enough, there's always someone that's going to accept it. And who's going to accept the glucose? Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, the fat. The fat always has an open door for the extra glucose and the extra sugar. It says, come on in, we got a place right here for you. If you have too much sugar in your diet, it's going to turn into fat much more easier, especially if you're not being active. If you're being active, you can eat all that you can. But if for the average person, for most of us who are sedentary and just work out a little bit, we have to limit our carbohydrates. Now, not all carbohydrates are created equal. You'll hear a lot about complex versus simple, and there are a little bit of differences between those two, but actually I look at those two as pretty similar because they're still going to be converted to sugar, and your body's still going to take it as glucose and use it as the same. However, I do like to use the glycemic index, and all the glycemic index is a way to show how much insulin release a certain carbohydrate has. So find a chart with a glycemic index, and it'll list all the different foods that gives you whether there's a high glycemic rating or a low glycemic rating. Try to avoid the ones that have a high glycemic rating because those are the ones that are going to tend to really spike your insulin quicker, and they don't get, your body doesn't use them as easily as the lower glycemic carbohydrates. This is also very important for diabetics, and anyone that is diabetic, if you know someone that is, this is an index that they use in a chart that is used a lot in their diet and them putting together their food plan. So the lower the glycemic index, the better. Now, one last thing though, fiber does not act like a carbohydrate. The way I look at fiber is it is a carbohydrate that the body typically does not absorb into the bloodstream. It's one that more is used as, again, intestinal health, kind of like when we talked about our cleanse. So most of our fiber that we consume just kind of goes right through our body, never really gets absorbed, doesn't really convert into glucose. A little bit does, but for the most part, it does not. So here we are back with our food label and talking about total carbohydrates and how you don't need to count fiber in those total carbohydrates. So what I have my clients do usually is take total carbohydrates and subtract out that fiber. And that's what I like to use as my numbers, my actual carbohydrates consumed. Now, I get a lot of questions about this because people say, oh, well, but look, it said it's low in sugar. It's, like this product, for example, it says only 5 grams of sugar, yet it shows 31 grams in total carbohydrates. Well, because of sugar alcohols and other sugars that food companies don't have to put on their labels, it's kind of a hidden carbohydrate. It's a hidden sugar. So don't be fooled by that. It's very important. You can subtract out fiber, but after that, consider total carbohydrates as your actual carbohydrate or your sugar content that you're taking in. Your body's going to break it down. Your body's going to look at it the same way. All right, so 4 guidelines of carbohydrates. How often do we consume them? How much do you need to consume? Which foods should we eat? And what about supplementation and that role with carbohydrates? How often do we consume? Well, really only as needed. And again, I've kind of talked about this before, how, more in the morning and less at night. And again, use what you need. If you're going to have a workout day, or it's going to be an active day, then you'll have a little bit more. If it's a day that you're just kind of sitting around, or maybe you're at work all day, or you're just kind of hanging with the kids all day, you're not real active that day, then those are the days you want to definitely have less carbohydrates. Your body doesn't need that much energy. It's funny, I use an example a lot of times where for a sedentary person who doesn't have to do a whole lot of activity, a bagel in the morning is enough sugar, enough glucose almost for the whole day to do regular brain functions and just regular bodily functions. So think about that. That one bagel is not a lot of carbohydrates, but that's really all of our body needs just for basic functions and for basic brain energy. So, but with carbohydrates, always have it with breakfast. That's most important. It's so important to have carbohydrates with breakfast because that's really what helps, that and the protein together really helps get that metabolism going for the day. Gives you that energy. So how much carbohydrates should we consume at each meal? Well, I'd say probably around 20 to 50 grams each meal. Now again, men maybe a little, men will be the higher numbers, maybe women on the lower numbers, or if you're really looking to kind of cut down, then stay on the lower end. Again, remember at nighttime, definitely keep those numbers lower. So around 20 to 50 grams at each meal, 10 to 25 grams with each snack. Okay, snacks, try to keep those carbs a little bit lower. For men, probably around 130 to 200 grams a day. Now, unless you're a real active guy, then you can have more than 200 grams a day, but really, again, if you're looking to lean down a little bit or whatever, if your goals are to lose a little bit of extra body fat, this is a great way to do it. Just keep those carbohydrates a little bit lower than maybe what you're used to. Women, probably somewhere around 80 to 130 grams a day would be ideal for you all. Again, if you're real active, maybe a little more. If you're a marathon runner, or if you're really into exercising a lot, you might need a little bit more carbohydrates. Otherwise, you can keep them a little lower. Now, if you're looking to really get some rapid fat burning, then you can even cut these numbers down even lower. Not too low though. Remember, again, you've got to at least have that bagel a day just for your brain function and for your body's overall health. So it's good to have some carbohydrates. You just don't need extra. So a great program that I found, we call it the Lean in 13, and this has been a great program I've been using with my clients for the last year and a half, and had great results with it because it just by adjusting your carbohydrates and making sure you're eating enough protein really helps you to achieve those results that you want very quickly. So I'm going to go over that with you real quickly now. So in your book, in the back, you've got a section that talks about the Lean in 13 program. And again, I don't want you to think of this as a diet. I just want you to think of this as an eating plan that you can use when you're looking to really achieve some rapid fat burning. And it's going to be very effective for you. And basically the way this works is it shows you right here all your different meals, from breakfast, snack, to lunch, to a snack, to dinner. And then if you need an additional snack after dinner, it's going to tell you about how we do what we call burn days. That's days 1 through 3. Okay, so those are the days your carbohydrates are a little more limited. Okay, they're pretty strict. You're going to have carbohydrates at breakfast, but you're not going to have too much more the rest of the day. You're mostly going to have vegetables and fibrous carbohydrates. You're going to kind of eliminate the sugars and the processed and any of those starches. Okay. Now on your refuel day, which is day number 4, that's where you're going to add some carbohydrates and some sugars back. So for example, we talk about maybe having an apple extra here, and with each of your meals, you're going to have a starch, or you're going to have a carbohydrate, or some type of a carb, okay? On this side, it gives you the whole regiment, so it shows you days 1 through 3, your 4th day, and then you're just repeating. Another 3 days of burning, another refuel day, another couple days of burning, and then your 13th day. Then at that point, you can have a 14th day, which is your free day, and then you can just start the process over again if you need to. But this is a great little 2-week, just a little kickstart that'll really help you get the results that you want. And it's all written down here, and it gives you all the different food items that you need. And just look in your book, and you'll find it all there. I think you'll really like doing that, or even just some variation of that. Some of my clients, they can't do 3 burn days, so I'll just have them do 2 burn days and then 1 refuel day. You can play with it however you want, but if you want to achieve those optimal results, follow the plan the way it is. You'll really like the results that you'll get from it. All right, so what foods are we going to eat? Whether you're doing that lean in 13 or you're just trying to follow a regular program, again, whole grains. Avoid the white flour and the sugars. Very important to do that. Vegetables, go crazy. Eat as many as you can. I always say that. Eat as many vegetables as you can. Again, it's mostly fiber. It's mostly cellulose, water. It's just good, healthy stuff that our body really needs, and our body doesn't convert it to fat. However, try to go green. The greener the vegetable, the better. And the only reason I say that is because some of your colored vegetables, like your corn and your carrots and some of those things, they're a little higher in sugar. So I'm not saying to eliminate them. I'm just saying don't eat quite as many. Still eat them because they're so good in other nutrients, but try to eat more of the green. Try to go green as much as possible. Okay, now as far as fruits go, this is where you have to be kind of careful, and you might have to limit it a little bit. Look, fruits are a great source of energy and food, but the problem is it's mostly sugar. So like we're trying to limit our sugars, especially in the afternoon or the evenings, you're going to have to probably limit the fruit a little bit. Maybe have it for breakfast. Have that orange juice or have that orange for breakfast, but just try to keep it limited more to the earlier part of the day. Now, obviously, I know that there's a lot of other good nutrients and the antioxidants that are in fruits, and that's where I just encourage my clients and for people to just make sure you're on a really good multivitamin to make up that difference. Because remember, you really need to eat 6 to 8 fruits a day just to get the needed nutrients and the antioxidants that our bodies really need to help fight free radicals and all those other things. So limit the fruits a little bit. Have a really good multivitamin instead to offset that. All right, so last thing is carbohydrate supplementation. And what kind of supplements do you use if you need to with carbohydrates, or to limit it or to replace? Now, we just talked about if you're trying to limit your fruit, make sure you have a good multivitamin. That's so important. Now, also, with our meal replacement shakes, which we talked about last time for our protein intake and so forth, though a lot of those have good carbohydrates in them as well. So that's a great time to use, especially for breakfast time or earlier in the day. There is products called carbohydrate blockers, and these are just products that you can take before let's say you're going to go out and eat a very high sugary or high carbohydrate meal, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to blow the whole diet or blow the whole plan. So there are carbohydrate blockers that some are pretty effective, and you can take those right before you're going to eat those high carbohydrate or high sugary foods, and they'll help to kind of absorb, and it helps your body absorb them lower in the colon, so that way it doesn't get in your bloodstream so quickly, and it doesn't have the chance to turn into fat so easily. So those are 2 items that I find are very effective as far as supplementation goes in relation to carbohydrates. Well, that about concludes it for carbohydrates. I know it was a lot of information, but I promise if you'll just take some of those little nuggets that I gave you and take some of those tips and that we went over just now, you're really going to find that that's going to help you to achieve the results that you want. Just lowering those carbohydrates maybe a little bit and coupled by increasing your protein levels a little bit, that balance, that formula right there, I find is usually the #1 best way to help somebody achieve the results that they want to, especially when it comes to getting a little bit leaner, losing those extra few pounds that you need to do. Just knocking those carbs down, because that way your body doesn't want to convert it to fat, and couple that with increasing the protein, so that way your body's feeding the muscle, burning the fat, and using just enough carbohydrates to give us that energy. Remember, we want to make our body use fat as energy, not carbohydrates. So keep those carbs as limited as you need, just enough to get by, just enough for your day. Remember, 1 bagel is enough for the whole day as far as just regular brain function and for a regular sedentary person. So just consume enough that you need. We also talked about vegetables. Go green, very important because of the fiber. Fiber is the one carbohydrate you just can't get enough of. So eat as many vegetables as you can. Try to eat more of the green ones. And then we also talked about how many grams at each meal. Kind of keep it similar to the protein. If you can match the protein with carbohydrates pretty much with each meal, you'll have great results, really phenomenal results. And we also talked a little bit about the lean in 13. Take a couple days and really limit those carbohydrates. We kind of call it carb cycling. You'll find great results. I really had tremendous results using a program like that, where you do a couple days of really low carbohydrates and then 1 day of just moderate carbohydrates, and then going back to the low carbohydrates again. Check out that Lean in 13 program. I think you'll really like it. I've had really good luck with that. That's it. We'll see you next time.